right, we'll continue with the agenda. We're going to talk about the challenges and opportunities of building a challenger bank for DeFi. And for that, we're going to call Charlotte Hill and Sean Kiernan.
Come this way. Hello.
Off you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, thank you very much for having us. We're here, as Mauricio just said, to discuss the challenges and opportunities of building a challenger bank for DeFi. And really delighted here to have with me today Sean Kiernan of Greengage Bank, who we'll get onto in a minute. But just setting some context in this, I'm a disputes lawyer and worked for financial services litigation for many years now. Working both for and against banks and financial institutions in the past, and having been on international secondment at one of the institutional banks. So with that in mind, I've seen the ways over the years in which many banks have built up their traditional banking schemes and how they've dealt with the many challenges. And then from that, how that's transitioned into the more DeFi banking world. We've obviously been through, over the years, various financial crises. We've been through the transition, the move away from relationship banking into the more kind of digital banking systems with, you know, the use of Twitter, with customer services, with the use of bots and the like, and then in more recent times, obviously with banks using e-money, digital assets, and blockchain. And so with that in mind, that's why I'm really pleased to be speaking with Sean today, who, as I say, is the CEO of Greengage. Greengage, for those that don't know, is a digital merchant bank. And it bridges the gap between the traditional financial services and the new digital innovations in crypto assets and blockchain. And so for this fireside chat, we'll be hoping to discuss and explore over the next half hour both the challenges and the opportunities that Sean and Greengage have seen in the DeFi space, and hopefully some key points we can take away from that. So with that in mind, Sean, before we dive into what Greengage really does and the challenges and opportunities that have presented themselves to you, perhaps you can just explain to us how you found yourselves in banking at Credit Suisse and really what led you to set up a digital merchant bank a few years ago.
Great. Thank you so much for having me as well, Charlotte. I hope the mic's working OK. So I'm a banker by background. I cut my teeth at Credit Suisse in Switzerland, moved here in 2010 to build a bank within Credit Suisse. And most recently, before Greengage, I was at the first bank in the world to do crypto, which was a Swiss bank, and I was the CEO of the London office. And by doing crypto, it was back in 2017, we had custody and trading, and we allowed clients to buy and sell. So it was pretty early days. And I loved it. And I thought, OK, I want to set up my own, having set up the bank within Credit Suisse. And it's very different to do it on your own back, obviously. But there you go.
Great. So that then led you then to create Greengage. What were you thinking at the time? What was missing in the banking industry? And what led you to go out alone and take it forward in that way?
Partially frustration. I think banking has a bad rap. And I think part of the thing that really bothered me was crypto companies were not getting access to banking services. And also the style of banking. I mean, I'm a bit old school in that I like the merchant banking kind of buccaneering way of working with clients, getting to know them, and trying to sit on their side of the table. Yeah. And I think a lot of banks are kind of selling to clients or pitching things at them and not really listening. And it's hard to deliver that kind of service. And that's why Fintech and crypto was so exciting to me. Yeah. Because here was a new technology that could make some of those flips of the side of the table you sit on possible.
Yeah. OK. And I'm guessing, no doubt, kind of taking that step back and adopting those more traditional practices probably led to a few challenges when you were first trying to set it up, did it? Yeah.
And maybe I should just describe what Greengage is first. Because I think digital merchant banking isn't necessarily kind of a common understanding. Merchant banking in its old school form was traditionally putting balance sheet of the institution with the client. So essentially prop trading, where you help an entrepreneur to build a business and you put the capital of the firm with that business. Yeah. And today we see that in kind of venture capital maybe, or private equity. But historically it had been banks that had been investing. And you can't do that in the current world. I mean, regulation as it stands is for good reason. The credit crises have shifted banks to putting tier 1 equity into their own balance sheet as opposed to deploying that in higher risk assets. But one thing that I was finding very intriguing is the idea of a decentralized balance sheet. And the world of DeFi has opened up kind of the thinking of a bank not just being a tied agent and selling its own products exclusively, but working with the open world of finance and the new sources of money that have come about, and servicing that for clients. So digital merchant banking is three things. It's a banking service, and we're in tests right now, so I'm very excited to say we're about to launch e-money banking services, which is payments and cards, GBP, Euro, etc. The second piece is a technology service. So we built our own core tech stack because we had to be able to integrate into the third-party platform. And the third bit is that platform of sourcing monies. So it's not just debt or equity, really, the traditional stuff. It's also the new digital stuff, where if we know a client who wants something, we try to find sources of money across the whole gamut of traditional and the new. And that could include NFTs or DeFi or some way to plug into that world. Because entrepreneurs don't care if the money is, I mean, as long as it's clean, as long as they get the money that they need to grow. Sometimes it's systematizing that logic of what type of money is accessible to them. And as long as they get it in a way that's suitable to their business, they're happy. So that's what I call digital merchant banking.
Okay, interesting. And out of, so you got those sort of three work streams, as it were, three different parts of the business. What's been the most challenging for you to date?
The banking services, and it's the core one. We tried to get a full banking license, and I mean that's still the dream, but it's not easy, and perhaps it shouldn't be easy. No. I think the difficulty is we were probably a bit too early for the regulator, and also we were probably not ready ourselves to be a crypto-friendly bank. The UK doesn't have yet any crypto-friendly banks. Switzerland and the US do, but there are e-money firms. So that was kind of our thought process of how do we maybe dial it back a bit and start with payments and cards rather than deposits and lending on our own book. The technology, though, was kind of the real bright spark I hadn't expected, because when you're a scrappy startup, when you're building your own tech, you can start making consulting revenues out of that or making SaaS apps. And so that's been essentially what's keeping us going with the platform before the launch of the e-money. So we facilitated quite a few loans, which has been also helpful.
Great. So 4 years since you created Greengage, where are you now? What's the size of the business and what sort of clients do you work with? It sounds quite varied from those sort of three different work streams.
And there's a lot of overlaps, thankfully. I mean, we're not retail, so it's kind of crossing out a long bucket of clients. The team's about 32 people now. We're making a couple million a year of revenue from those two tech and platform verticals. What we're trying to do in the coming years is really get that banking service right, because I think if we can build a good and reasonably priced service for letting payment transactions for crypto companies and eventually SMEs with a relationship manager, meaning that they have somebody that they can call if things break down, slightly differentiates us from people that just have maybe an app. And apps are great, we will have them, but I mean, I want service when I'm looking for a banking relationship, and I think clients would prefer that too.
Perhaps, I mean, you've touched there, and I know, having discussed it with you previously, relationship banking is at the core of your business, and as you said here at the beginning, you know, that's the old school way of banking that you're taking forward to this new DeFi, digital banking space. Perhaps you can just explain that to us as to why that's so important to you and how you think that hopefully will differentiate you to others in the industry.
It's a really interesting time, and we see a lot of venture capital money going into pure SaaS, pure tech, scalable hockey stick kind of innovation, and that's great. I'm not trying to say that hopefully we find the next Google in the crypto space. But the one thing that I feel is people get lost sometimes, and particularly with the sources of money. If you're speaking to an SME and they're trying to decipher amidst the noise of revenue-based finance, asset-backed, let alone the world of DeFi or crypto. If you're building widgets in Yorkshire, like these things are, they're quite difficult to get your head around, and you want to talk to someone. And I think that act of listening and helping to work with someone, particularly if we can systematize that structure of letting them see the panoply of options. And a lot of that can be done because we built the tech stack via APIs and letting maybe the smaller transactions be automated with embedded finance. But the bigger ticket stuff, you still need people.
Yeah.
And that actually is where we make our margins. So we're not focusing on e-money banking as a source of crazy fees, because I think there are options in the market that are quite expensive.
Yeah.
We want to charge reasonable fees to build the relationship, because at some point, either we give them the tech services and we make a little bit more money there, or the real dream is that platform business. And that platform business can grow with the likes of digital debt or products that we haven't seen yet take off. And I think that's why the SME market is so interesting.
Okay, and that's really interesting, because I mean, that, from my understanding, that's been your ethos since you created Greengage, and actually that is supported, I think, when I was reading Greengage's recent survey that was released on digital banking services, that basically, I mean, having read that, the findings of that, that was pretty much everything I kept hearing. I mean, apart from the security, obviously, of the business and the like, but it was saying that one of the main things that a client looks for an account provider, following very closely behind security, was trust and ease of access. And to me, trust really underpins that. It's that relationship that means that they can pick up the phone to you, to your team, and say, this is my situation, this is where my business is going, what can you do to help me? And no doubt, because you built that relationship, it means you actually can understand what that business needs.
I mean, I think we need the fintechs. We need the whizzy apps, and we need all these solutions that immediately sort things out. But I think them in isolation almost precludes the best possible outcome. The analogy of kind of the Terminator versus the Iron Man I keep on using, but the Terminator being the pure tech solution works for me like 99.9% of the time, and that is great. But my financial controller, whenever that 0.01% kind of breaks down, he's on the phone to someone trying to sort something out, and it takes a very long time if that phone human dialogue hasn't been built already to understand each other. And so we're not for the S of the SME necessarily, the more retail end of it, but if somebody wants to grow and wants to have something that is a proper service, I think that's worth investing in and paying a little bit of money.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you, I mean, we've obviously got, and this kind of goes back to the title of today, we're kind of looking at the old traditional banking system, which, as we say, is underpinned by that personal relationship and that sort of important service. And then you've got the much more traditional banking, digital kind of banking, e-money payment providers and things like that, where everything is streamlined. As I say, it's all sort of via Twitter, the bots, whatever. How are you bridging that? Because they're two quite different business models traditionally, and there aren't very many, if any, no doubt someone here will correct me, but out in that space. So how are you kind of intertwining the two? Because no doubt that's led to quite a few issues along the way.
I mean, it's tricky. I don't want to pretend otherwise. The platform bit is where it all comes together. So the biggest issues, particularly being in a regulated space, are always AML and KYC.
Yeah.
And I think DeFi is amazing, but there's very few bits that you can interact with as a regulated platform to source monies that don't have pools where necessarily KYC might not have been done. And so you have to work with exclusively those bits of it. Swarm Markets, for example, is a regulated DeFi exchange. Or there's certain protocols, like the institutional sides of MetaMask or Aave that you can engage with.
Yeah.
And I think more broadly, there is a problem in, as you say, the kind of traditional banking world that everybody's talking about, or at least the Bank of England is talking, and kind of us in consequence, this funding gap for small businesses. And I think that's why, of all the bits of the traditional economy that are the most hungry, they'll probably be the first ones that are looking for new sources of money. And we've seen that with the NFT take-up, actually, that it's not for everyone, but if you're a fashion house or a fast-moving consumer goods, or you have some community platform. I think a few of us are members of kind of Black's Club in Soho, where Peter and I had a drink not too long ago, where you can buy an NFT for membership. These kind of things work for certain types of businesses. And I think for our job as a digital merchant bank, it's to navigate those waters, understand the client, and then say, okay, you have these options.
Yeah.
We can't do everything ourselves, hence why it's a platform we work with partners to bring it together.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I think you're right. I think it goes to understanding the business use case of whatever the business is and what its real purpose is, and then finding how you can help them through whichever service it is that you're working on with them. And I mean, obviously NFTs are the perfect example of that business use case and whether or not they've got real viability. Turning then, I mean, I know you've mentioned the banking license being an issue and regulation. I wonder if you can just explain to us a few of your challenges, not necessarily in that remit, albeit no doubt that is one of the big ones for you, and sort of the challenges you've experienced and, you know, if you've been able to overcome them, how, or what you're kind of doing to try to make this business even more successful than it already is.
I think it's great that we've come along quite a far way. I think, I mean, you and I have been in this for a few years now, but there is more institutional understanding, and a lot of the big banks are coming in, and I think those are good things.
Yeah.
And I think we've also seen that education is such a big deal, and we've done increasingly work with Parliament. We had 2 studies with the APPG blockchain that we put out, kind of thousands of pages of just data, because we wanted to get to know the market ourselves, but also wanted to educate and say, look, there's an opportunity for UK PLC to grow. And there have been great people, like, I know Matt Hancock was speaking here yesterday, of both parties, or all parties actually in the UK now that are now learning. And there's various industry bodies. We engaged with the UK Crypto Asset Business Council, or UK CBC. There's a drinks event tonight with 30 parliamentarians going. And it's something we're going to bring our own Cryptionary to. So the Greengage glossary will get printed. And I mean, it's these little things that, funny enough, if you don't know what blockchain or Bitcoin mean, and you're out there designing policies, regulators have a need for that backbone of support from Parliament to give them the cover. There's no upside for them to authorize firms if they blow up, and so they need, and that was my learning actually. They needed that engagement with policymakers. Hence why I think the Financial Services and Markets Bill is a really good thing. To give the secondary objectives to the regulator on innovation and competition. Yeah, no, I agree. I think education is fundamental, isn't it? You can't start engaging in the business, and you certainly can't start drafting legislation that's going to apply to everybody in the industry without understanding at least the basics. So actually, I'm looking forward to seeing your Cryptionary tonight. Well, there's quite a few good ones out there, so we're just adding ours to the mix.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun. So we talked about education, and obviously, I think it's really important that Greengage is part of that policy piece and kind of helping to move with the lobbyists and the others to push forward and to drive the regulation to the extent it's needed. And obviously, it's whether or not quite how far, whether they overstep and how they overstep. And that's no doubt been discussed lots and a conversation for a different day. But how else? I mean, I know you've been engaging in with all these sort of different political parties and things. What else? I mean, Greengage seems to be doing lots of great work in this area. You mentioned part of the APPG blockchain. How did you get involved in that? Because again, that's quite different for a digital merchant bank coming in and kind of, you know, sending all this data across from your survey and the like. I just wonder if you can tell us a bit more about that.
Like, I came into this as an ingenue completely. I mean, I'm not from the UK originally, and I mean, this is a difficult country to get your head around. And I had thought originally that you're that front kid in the classroom, you have a shiny red apple, like off you go and submit this application and you get received. And there is an aspect of that. I think other countries are much less fair, but you still need to get stuck in. And that was kind of something that I've realized. You need to be seen as a bit of the woodwork, seen to be doing good things. And then you have a shot. So that's our effort.
And so you obviously came into this with the intention to gain your banking license and to deal with sort of the primary layer of your business as you just described to us. But you've said that then there were these additional opportunities that just came your way with the tech side and the platform side. How did they arise? I mean, how do you kind of go from a relatively mainstream concept, albeit on a digital bank side, to then opening it up and then, you know, creating your own tech and scaling it out? Because that's quite an interesting development, I think.
And I'm quite glad it happened. I think we're a much more grown-up organization now than you were at the kitchen table phase. Actually, funnily, Stephanie Ramazan was just speaking from Gemini. She was part of the early stage of the team, so it was good to see her having grown wings. And but part of that journey is you need to survive, and revenues are always king. I mean, funding is always tricky for startups, and we have been very grateful to our investors. But when you have a tech stack that you've built, you have to think about kind of I've got a team of techies. There's about 17 guys running around kind of building stuff. How do you monetize that?
Yeah.
And the trick for us and why we wanted to build it ourselves is there are amazing things out there, but it's again that 1% or 0.001% you want to change, just you can't control it.
Yeah.
And so we said from the outset, the key thing for us is data. It's can we own that data and can we work with client data, because GDPR we're a bit neurotic about, and create something that allows that client data to engage with open banking and open finance through a platform, hence why we wanted to have that relationship with the banking service.
Yeah.
I'd love to get the full banking license because I think eventually that's the more sustainable bit of the model,
Yeah.
the net interest margin you get on
Yeah.
deposit taking and lending. But I think for us that will only be a piece of the story. I never actually, having gone through this journey, want to be a tied agent bank. I think just pitching your own product doesn't really engage with the client in the same way. Hence why, I mean, the metaverse stuff, we're launching a branch in the metaverse now, and there's a way to interact with clients and think of that Web3 world in a very different way.
Yeah.
And if we hadn't had that journey, I don't think intellectually that we would be where we are today.
No, fascinating. You've literally taken the question out of my mouth there. I was going to ask, what's next for Greengage? And I assumed we were going to talk about Web3 a bit. But, I mean, where are you? I mean, you've obviously, as we say, we've got those sort of 2 limbs ticked. The banking license, hopefully, in due course, will be there. What are you planning next? I mean, where can you see the future going? Because obviously it's such a fast-moving industry, and you're in quite a niche part of that market, and quite an unusual part. I mean, where are we going with this?
So I think we're really lucky with the banking services. We're a little bit late to that game. I know that, but I think with the price point and our background model, our game is to understand the companies that we work with, and we have the platform then to create opportunities for these companies to maybe post the product or engage with traditional players.
Yeah.
So one of our key benchmarks for this year is to go live with the banking service. We're that close. We want to launch a SaaS kind of solution with productizing bits of the tech stack into apps. So there's a telephone preference service, which is super nerdy, but it's, so you have a do not call database, which we built, again, because of the data being such a key thing. We're now just launching little apps on this.
Brilliant.
And we're doing a coin forensics aggregator app, so the red, amber, green for various providers can be integrated into a tech stack.
Yeah.
But the platform for me is the kind of the be-all and end-all. If we can find sources of money that are novel and keep our ear to the ground, because crypto always kicks up new things. So that, I mean, I hadn't seen NFTs coming to the scale that they have.
Yeah.
If we hear these kind of new things before the street and can bring them to traditional people looking for money, I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah, great. Well, 5 minutes to go. I think if you don't mind, we'll move on to a couple of questions coming in from the audience.
Okay, great.
And some interesting ones coming up.
Yeah.
The first one I was quite interested in from the banking side is what can or should the regulator do to help support digital banks like Greengage?
So I think there's a few things already there. Obviously, we had the sprints, the crypto asset area, and I think that is more the crypto side of it. I think the tricky thing with authorizations of banks is that there's so few that come through. And we even see that some new banks that get authorized cold aren't able to raise the money to launch.
Yeah.
And even the ones that have launched, I mean, some of the big names, the Monzos, etc., are still loss-making.
Yeah.
And so it's not easy. And I think one of the things that we're keen to do is build a viable business where essentially, if we can break that profit kind of mark, and we're essentially close at times, given the tech and the platform from the lending we facilitate. And you can act like a bank and almost be a bank. You de-risk it. So I think the one thing that regulators need to engage with is risk always.
Yeah.
Reputational risk. They're worried about customer outcomes. And if we can work with them to educate and also help them to see that you need this kind of innovation to unlock what we see as that 22 billion sterling funding gap for SMEs.
Yeah.
There's good players out there that are doing that, but they're doing that still with that tied agent traditional model. They've just made the traditional banking model a bit more efficient.
Yeah.
And we're something completely different.
Yeah.
We do want to lend, and we'll look at kind of credit fund stuff and getting that ship going. But tapping into this amazing world of crypto and DeFi, I think, I can't see the other fintech challenger banks doing that anytime soon. And so we want to be the one doing that.
Yeah. That's interesting. There's some questions coming up as well about the actual logistics of the business model from the banking side, about whether you'd use a SWIFT network, how you'd calculate interest rates, which, I mean, who knows how at the moment? I'm not even sure the Bank of England does. But how does that work from the using kind of the crypto, blockchain, DeFi side of it? How are the two integrated?
Yeah, so on Swift, it's very difficult to get access to Swift. So it's not a day one for us, unfortunately. I'd love it for it to be. I'd also love USD, but we're doing kind of baby steps and then growing up.
Yeah.
I think we have solutions for Swift, but that's for next year. So Euro GBP to launch, great. I'm really happy just to get that going. In terms of interest rates, I mean, we thankfully have traditional product to look at, and we have experience from the players we work with, be they family offices, credit funds, etc., as well as some of the more natively DeFi platforms. You can see there's aggregations of rates in the market. The tricky thing is the risk management. And for now, we're on the lower risk end because we're a platform. So we facilitate, we don't take the principal risk.
Yeah.
But I do want to take the principal risk, but you do it in ways that are clever down the road.
Okay, fascinating. We'll see what comes from that in a year or so down. Another question is how you can attract capital from the likes of Aave and MetaMask. And separately to that, I think, whether you can accept stable coins.
So again, I'd love to day one, and we're thinking about all these things. Stablecoins and CBDCs generally, I think, have to happen.
Yeah.
And the payment side is something that, I mean, essentially is a tax that we're all paying as we move money around. There's all these little fees in the background and lags of time. And so I think that world will be something we need to engage with, but I have to admit we're a small actor, so the best we can do is plug into stuff as that emerges.
Yeah.
In terms of the DeFi platforms and how you can engage, I think there's two ways. Either you act as a mechanism to conduit monies to them through a regulated platform, and you do that hand-holding and make sure that people are having that level of trust and insurance if need be. And the other way is surfacing monies from these platforms to people like SMEs that are looking for them. We're looking at this very closely, but I can't say we've launched yet.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose obviously, if you're looking to SMEs in terms of stable coins, actually, as and when you get to that point, you can accept stable coins and you can deal with them because there's no prohibition currently.
No, and with an e-money service as well, I mean, these are pretty straightforward. It's just a different name, and as long as they can plug into your systems, off you go. Custody, essentially, is the tricky bit. But
quite.
Yeah.
Fine, that's a conversation for another day.
Yes.
So I think that's probably our questions. We've got 1 minute to go. I wonder if you've got any concluding thoughts you want to share with us.
No, I mean, I think a big thanks actually to Peter. I think conferences like this are great, just bringing people together, and hopefully there's one or two people I can talk to afterwards.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to, as I said, with this platform business, grow into the community and keep that going. So thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I find it fascinating, generally, as I say, from my background being in financial services, as to how kind of the old is bridged with the new. And I think Greengage is doing a great job at that and sort of leading the way and helping us to champion, the key stakeholders to try and hold them accountable and give them the education piece and stats. So thank you for doing that. And
likewise, thanks for everything you're doing.
Nice speaking.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.